I'm Peter Ryan. I'm Principal Analyst on Ovum's IT Services team. There's a number of reasons why South Africa's contact center outsourcing space has grown so much over the past 10 years. I would say number one, it's been the proactive nature of the industry working with the trade association, which is BPSA, as well as working with various levels of government. One of the things that I've witnessed over the course of the past few years has been the ability for enterprises to look at South Africa, whether it's on the enterprise side or on the vendor side, and to be able to determine whether or not it's a location in which it can do contact center work for their consumers, whether they be in the United Kingdom, Australia, or New Zealand. The fact that South Africa has got such a commercial mindset and also has a cultural affinity with the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand, to my mind, speaks volumes about the ability of agents, whether they're based in Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, or Port Elizabeth, to be able to field a call from Melbourne, Sydney, Manchester, or London. There's a lot of great things that have happened over the course of the past 10 years, at least since I've been traveling to South Africa, with the contact center industry working not just to establish itself as one of the competitors, but as perhaps one of the leading single offshore or nearshore locations for outsourced contact center services, serving industries across a variety of vertical markets. You know, the first time I went to South Africa in 2004 to take a look at the contact center industry, it was amazing the extent to which it was trying to propose itself as a solution for any CRM element to effectively any different country using any different function. But I'd say over the past 10 years or so, really there's been a big shift in mindset. And what's happened is, as the industry has matured in South Africa, there's been much more of an emphasis on finding what are the key elements of the value proposition that South African agents and South African managers can do better than anybody else. Something that I think is really important is the fact that since 2004, and especially since I'd say 2011, with effectively a rebirth of the South African value proposition when it comes to outsourcing, there's been much more of an emphasis on doing customer care and providing strong elements of all contact center related services, whether it's voice or non-voice, for the English-speaking market, most notably the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. And to my mind, that's probably one of the biggest elements we've seen in the evolution of BPO in the country since, as I say, the first time I had the chance to visit back in 2004. Where's the industry going? That's a very good question too. And as the value proposition continues to evolve, I believe that we're going to see much more of a focus on shared services, on higher value BPO, including knowledge process outsourcing and legal process outsourcing, which is a natural course of events for an industry as dynamic and as willing as you would find in the South African context. You know, there's a lot of great work being done around the world when it comes to contact centers, when it comes to broader-based BPO. But every country has its niche. Every country has its specialty. And when somebody asks me where South Africa fits, there's no question in my mind that South Africa really, I believe, has a corner on the market when it comes to higher value services, when it comes to front office BPO. Now that might mean accentuated levels of customer care. That might mean warm calling in terms of a marketing and sales context. It might mean higher levels of technical support like what we see happening with Amazon based in Cape Town. But the bottom line is that South Africa has a tremendous legacy as an English-speaking country in terms of education and in terms of being able to mold educated, bright, and hungry young agents that are willing to try and service end users and consumers in the United Kingdom, in Australia, and New Zealand with whichever element that they need help around and why they're contacting a particular enterprise. And there's another element to this too. Something that I think is really important from the context of South Africa and that I've witnessed on my many trips into the country is the extent to which that the culture overlaps in South Africa with the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And a couple of examples I think are worth noticing. If you take a look at, say, financial services, the exact same terminology related to credit cards, bank accounts, and insurance are used in South Africa as you'd find in the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. Now that means a significantly greater level of empathy with a South African agent that's dealing with a consumer in any offshore or nearshore country amongst those three countries I've just mentioned when they're helping to handle a call. Why? Because the agent's using the exact same terminology for their own financial services products on a daily basis. And I think you can underscore the extent to which, when you're talking in the context of higher value services that the South African agent is able to deliver, you take a look at the extent to which the cultural overlap is a very real thing. Coming to London like I am right now, it's amazing to see the number of South Africans that are living and working in the UK. From the standpoint of Australia, I remember recently being in South Africa and having the chance to watch a Springboks versus Wallabies game. It was a rugby match, and I thought to myself, well, it's a shame I didn't get tickets because it looks like a lot of fun. Now, the reason I thought that it was in South Africa was because of the number of South African jerseys and flags in the audience. The game was actually being played in Brisbane, but when you look at the number of South Africans that travel to Australia, the number of South Africans that have decided to reside in Australia and New Zealand, or even spend a little time on vacation there, you can see that there's a tremendous cultural fit between South Africa and its cousins in the Australian, New Zealand, and the UK Anglosphere. I believe that North America is a really opportunistic market over the long term for South African contact center outsourcing and broader BPO. Now, there's a couple of reasons for this. There's a major emphasis right now, whether it's in the United States or Canada, on the quality of the offshore or nearshore servicing that a consumer based in either one of those countries is going to receive from an agent who they're interacting with. To my mind, South Africa is an extremely high value market. It's a market in which very high value customer care, technical support, marketing and sales can be delivered using voice or non-voice methods. Now, knowing the emphasis that enterprises in North America currently have on customer satisfaction and using customer satisfaction to retain clients and build new ones into their sphere of consumer database, I believe that using South Africa and taking advantage of the skill set, the commercial set, and the capacity for English language as a first tongue or a mother tongue is a fantastic chance in which companies in Canada and the US can diversify, not to say abandon their deployments in India, the Philippines, Mexico, or Colombia, but rather mitigate them and effectively build on the diversity of their delivery platforms and look at South Africa as an opportunity in which to handle any element of front office BPO. Something that I also think from the context of North America should be considered is language diversity and the ability of South Africa to play to a particular niche of the North American linguistic market. We all know that in the United States there's approximately 50 million residents who count Spanish as their mother tongue. We know that in Canada, roughly 10 million people count French as their mother tongue. Now, I want to make it very clear, I don't believe that South Africa as a delivery location will be playing to the Hispanic or to the Canadian French-speaking market. I believe that the value proposition that South Africa brings to the table from a language standpoint and from an agent linguistic capacity will very much be on the English side of the equation. And that positions South Africa extremely nicely when comparing against offshore traditional locations for North America, which include India and the Philippines. In my view, South Africa has a tremendous opportunity to help enterprises and to help outsourcers balance out their delivery locations for English language support by including the South African experience in the context of their other onshore and offshore deployments. There's a real opportunity when you take a look at South African outsourcing opportunity with regards to delivery for the domestic market, but also into the rest of Africa. One of the things that I've been amazed at over the course of the past 10 years has been the fact that since 2004, South Africa has not only become a delivery market for the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and other points beyond, but it's also evolved as a consumer market. So the average South African consumer today is consuming significantly more in terms of volume and in sophistication than they were a decade back. Think about the chance as a contact center provider coming in, not just servicing end users that might be overseas, but also helping servicing South Africans who are picking up new cellular telephones, that are buying new television sets, that are taking on new financial services such as credit cards, insurance policies. think the ability to support those people as another added value of coming in and working in South Africa. And the same goes when you take a look at the rest of the continent. The economies in a number of sub-Saharan African locations are taking off. A great example would be Nigeria, in the sense that there's a tremendous amount of consumerism that's going on in that particular location. Other locations that have stabilized tremendously, such as Rwanda, will be requiring sophisticated consumer support that could potentially be delivered from South Africa. The same goes with Botswana. Some tremendous opportunity that we've seen over the past 10 to 15 years in Botswana, which has truly normalized and become a full-fledged consumer democracy that requires the support South African agents can deliver at the end of the day. South Africa can offer front office BPO clients, I think, a tremendous amount. And the whole nature of this question, I think, comes down to front office BPO. It's not just contact center work anymore. The bottom line is that so many outsourcers and their clients are looking to try and house themselves and situate themselves in locations in which you can do a whole myriad of different types of business processes. That might mean answering the telephone, but it also might mean handling interactions via email. It might mean doing work using web chat. It might mean doing work using social media. There's a whole myriad in terms of the ecosystem of the customer relationship that goes just beyond picking up a telephone and having a conversation. The bottom line is that there's very few offshore locations in the world in which proper, true front office BPO in terms of service management, but also in terms of analytics and the technology can be done. And South Africa's got a tremendous mindset when it comes to engineering and information technology. More than ever, enterprises want to work with an outsourcer that doesn't just handle the nature of picking up a telephone or answering an email or handling a tweet. Rather, they want to work with an outsourcer that's got the team in place that can handle collecting data, interpreting data, and providing strategic ideas in terms of what that data means. And in South Africa, you've got that mindset. In my mind, that makes the compelling, very, very compelling value proposition for front office BPO if it's done in South Africa. BPESA is doing a lot of work, I think, to facilitate BPO growth in South Africa. And were it not for BPESA as an organization, I think that the South African value proposition and the boots that are already on the ground probably wouldn't be in the position that they are today. The bottom line is that since BPESA came into inception, since 2011, in my full opinion as an analyst, they've done a lot in terms of promoting the country, evangelizing South Africa as a location of choice in which to do contact center work and front office BPO to the rest of the world. The team at BPESA works tirelessly to make sure that potential investors have not only an awareness of South Africa, but the information that they need, not just to come to the country to set up a location, but also to choose the right location within South Africa to house a BPO facility, keeping in mind what their vertical needs are, keeping in mind what the consumer's needs are, and keeping in mind the corporate culture of the particular enterprise that they're dealing with. In my view, South Africa has been facilitated tremendously by BPESA and the efforts to bring investors down, to see firsthand what's happening in existing deployments for BPO, but also to bring the analyst community down and to bring journalists down to make sure that thought leaders and that individuals who will have an influence on the decisions will be able to understand and be able to provide that information to their readership or to their clients. To my mind, BPESA has been perhaps a great boon for South African outsourcing. Incentives are very, very important, and I can't emphasize the point to which it's crucial for any country that wants to attract contact center or BPO investment to have some type of an incentive program in place. Now, one of the things that I think is important from the perspective of South Africa has been the fact that the government, the industry, and BPESA have worked hand in hand to revise the incentive program on an ongoing basis. The incentives that were offered perhaps 10 years ago might still have some relevancy, but they might need updating. And that's been really important, I think, from the perspective of South Africa remaining competitive. The incentives have always been under scrutiny, and they've always been under a position in which they've been updated and revised to make them market worthy. We can talk in the BPO sector about countries or locations that have come and gone because their incentive programs haven't evolved. And this, to my mind, is important in the South African context because incentives in South Africa have evolved, they've remained market worthy, and they've been updated to facilitate businesses coming in under different economic conditions than perhaps they would have been 5 to 10 years ago. My impression of South Africa since I first started coming down in 2004 have truly evolved, and I'd say it's like a snowball. It just gets better and better. It's a very, very warm country in which to visit as a tourist or as a business traveler. People are genuinely interested why you're there, where you're coming from, and what your plans are. And there's so much to see. It's one of the most diverse countries in the world that I've ever had the privilege of visiting. Whether you're sitting in Cape Town, perhaps having a glass of wine in Stellenbosch, perhaps even visiting some of the cool and funky places in Johannesburg, or doing a tour of Soweto. You might decide to take a weekend and go up to Sun City. I've done all these things, and it makes me want to come back. When you look at South Africa's cultural evolution and commercial evolution, there's a lot to be said for what's happened since 2004. Let's keep in mind that it's still a very young democracy, really 20 years since the first fully democratic election, but I would say that it's leapfrogged in so many different ways. It's a multi-party democracy in which pretty well every stakeholder wants to encourage foreign investment, wants to encourage a window onto the rest of the world, and wants to encourage people to come down and understand not just what South Africa can offer from perhaps a touristic standpoint, but also from a commercial standpoint. And this is why I think that South Africa and BPO have had so much success over the course of the past 10 years or so since South Africa really came onto the scene. It's because when people come down, they find that the warmth is genuine. They find that the value proposition is real, and they find that the work can be done is a success. And to my mind, when you consider how the country has evolved, perhaps over the past 8, 9, 10 years, there's been a real focus on quality, there's been a real focus on successful outcomes, and there's been a real quality on making people understand they're welcome to visit and to do business.